What is the most genuinely mind-boggling school of esoteric thought or philosophy that you've ever come across and that has left an impression on you?
I would say that without doubt, the most mind-boggling moment for me in the history of Western esotericism is the conversations between Dr. John Dee and Edward Kelly and angels.
He was at the court of Elizabeth I. Is
That's
that
right.
the astrologer who was?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
astrologer. Yeah. So John Dee was one of the probably the smartest guy in England at the time. This is 1580s.
Okay, so not just some con man who was.
No.
Okay.
His scrier might have been a con man, but and he was in fact he had his ears cut off for previously engaging in fraud. But yeah, John Dee, this incredibly brilliant astrologer and mathematician, he coined the term British Empire. I mean, he was really the smartest, one of the smart. He had the biggest library in England at the time. In fact, his library became the cornerstone of what became the British Library. So this guy was a no joke intellectual, and he basically exhausted what he could find out in the world with books. And he was like, if I'm going to find what he called radical truths, I'm going to have to talk to the angels. And he tried, and the angels didn't respond. And so he brought in what is called a scrier. It's like a medium. That scrier was one of them. He had 3 of them over the course of his lifetime, 3 or 4. And that scrier was a dude named Edward Kelly. And Kelly was admittedly a con man, but also he had a weird talent, as much as one can say this is a talent. And over the course of the next 7 years, we have documentation where Kelly and Dee talk to angels and demons. And that wouldn't be so weird, aside from the fact that at one point, the angels began to reveal to them a language, a distinct language called, what we now call Enochian, but they never called it that. They called it the celestial speech. And you would expect this language just to be a bunch of gibberish in the same way that people talk in tongues, and it's glossolalia. And we know, glossolalia has, it's nonsense.
Yeah.
Meaningful.
It's also a bit funny, to be honest.
It is, yeah. It's a bit strange, but it's semantically meaningless, and that would be fine if it were glossolalia. The problem is that this Enochian stuff has grammar and syntax and vocabulary, and it was revealed backwards in reverse order, letter by letter, over the course of weeks. And as a young person, when I discovered this, I was learning Latin at the time, and I had my taste of grammar. I knew grammar was hard. And I also knew that you couldn't fake grammar. You could fake a bunch of nonsense, but you couldn't fake conjugations and declensions, and you couldn't fake that backwards in reverse order with like no cribs. And this like fired my imagination. I was just like, look, I'm not sure if I believe in any of this, but something's going on here. Like, this is not just like people knocking on a table in the dark and saying they're talking to spirits. You can fake that. Something's happening here. And that, I learned about this when I was 14, I think. And I ultimately ended up going to graduate school, studying Western esotericism, partially inspired by this whole thing. And it's easy to believe that this was just a con, and, but Dee and Kelly made decisions that you would never make if it were just a con job. Dee was told by the angels to go call out in court the Holy Roman Emperor, Rudolph II. And he went in front of the court and called out Rudolph II to his face, called him a sinner and told him to repent. Like, that is not a smart thing to do. Edward Kelly took a wife that he didn't want to take because the angels told them to do it. They swapped wives at one point, had sex with each other's wives because the angels told them to do it, and they did it. And it's these poor women, of course, in the midst of all this is nightmarish. And these records are preserved. We have the exact records. Dee, in fact, hid them in a chest, and then they were discovered a little bit after Dee died, and they were published subsequently. And the manuscripts all survive. I've worked with the manuscripts. That's the strangest moment. And it's strange because there's this language aspect to it. There are these angels talking to these guys. It lasts over the course of 7 years. There's just so much going on there that whether you believe in the supernatural or not, it just cries out for some kind of explanation. It cries out for some kind of investigation. It cries out for, what in the hell is this? And I went to graduate school and I wrote several papers on studying it. I've written, I think, the authoritative paper and trying to give an idea about what went on there. And I think that's, to me, the strangest the strangest in all of it.
Hey, thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. This podcast has no sponsors, no production team, and no editors. It's just little old me. And as such, I'm at the mercy of you lovely folks watching and listening. So please do subscribe on YouTube. Click that little bell thing. Follow on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also, I don't want to sell you an ugly t-shirt that you don't really need. So if you can, and most of all, if you want, please support me on Patreon. And at this point, I have to express my eternal gratitude to my patrons on Patreon, aka the producers of this show. As always, without you comrades, this podcast simply wouldn't exist. So massive, massive thank you to Ole, Marin Ferrara, Aljaž, Štrole, Aida, Mancian, Miha Medved, Medinho, Goran, Gordon, Lorenzo, Jurečuk, Mila, Carmen, Veronica, and Taichi. You guys are the best.